In 1922, Anais walked into a room on the third floor of a mansion in San Jose and never walked out the way she came in. She left through a window, down a staircase that had been built for no one, because the woman who owned the house believed a door could confuse a spirit, and a staircase to nowhere could trap one. That woman was Sarah Winchester, heir to a rifle fortune, and the house she built has since become the address most associated with the idea that a home can be haunted not by accident, but by design. But Sarah Winchester's house is only one address on a much longer list. Across California, from the Gold Country to the Pacific coastline, there are 11 houses that investigators, historians, and paranormal researchers keep returning to, and in several cases, keep refusing to enter again. This is the story of those 11 houses, what happened inside them, and why some of the people trained to walk into the unknown decided it wasn't worth walking in twice. California's haunted reputation didn't start with ghost stories. It started with money, ambition, and the speed at which fortunes were made and lost during the state's first 100 years. Gold rushes, rail lines, shipping empires, and land grabs created enormous wealth in a matter of decades. And enormous wealth built enormous houses. Many of those houses outlived the fortunes that built them. Families died out, businesses collapsed, and the buildings were left standing, full of the residue of everything that had happened inside them. Historians who study these properties will tell you the same thing again and again. The oldest, largest, and strangest houses in California were built during periods of grief, obsession, or unchecked ambition. That combination, it turns out, is exactly what keeps a story alive for over a century. The Winchester Mystery House is where most people start, and for good reason. Sarah Winchester spent 38 years directing continuous construction on a farmhouse that eventually swelled to over 160 rooms. Doors open onto blank walls. Staircases climb into ceilings. Windows look into other rooms instead of the outside world. The popular version of the story says a medium told Sarah that the spirits of everyone killed by a Winchester rifle were hunting her family, and that construction had to never stop or she would die. Historians are more cautious. Company records show a woman managing a large estate with a very active interest in architecture and a lot of time on her hands. But even the skeptical historians admit one thing. Tour guides and maintenance staff report cold spots in specific rooms, tools that go missing and reappear in locked areas, and a persistent, unexplained sense of being watched in the section of the house called the seance room. That should have been a strange but contained story. Instead, it became the first entry on a much longer list. 400 miles south, in downtown San Diego, sits a house that the American Institute of Parapersonality Science once called one of the most scientifically studied haunted locations in the country. The Whaley House was built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley, on land where a man named Yankee Jim Robinson had been hanged for theft 2 years earlier. Whaley knew this when he built there. He built anyway, because the lot was cheap and the location was central. At first, that decision seemed insignificant. The house functioned as a home, a courthouse, a theater, and a general store over the following decades. But staff and visitors began reporting the sound of footsteps on the staircase when no one else was present, the smell of perfume in empty rooms, and the repeated sighting of a man in old-fashioned clothing standing near the spot where the gallows once stood. In 1960, the Travel Channel would later report, the Whaley House became the first private residence in the United States to be officially designated as haunted by the U.S. Department of Commerce, a claim tied to tourism licensing rather than scientific confirmation, but one that stuck in the public imagination regardless. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the pattern became. Because Yankee Jim wasn't the only death connected to the property. Thomas Whaley's own daughter, Violet, died by suicide inside the house after a failed marriage. Staff still report the sound of a woman weeping on the second floor, concentrated almost entirely in the room where she died. One tragedy might explain a haunting. Two tragedies, on the same property, 40 years apart, is where a house stops being a house and starts being a place people talk about for generations. Not every California haunting comes from tragedy. Some come from luxury. The Hotel del Coronado, opened in 1888 across the bay from San Diego, was built to be the largest resort hotel in the world, and for a while, it was. Presidents stayed there. It appears, uncredited, in the film Some Like It Hot. It was, by every measure, a success story. Then, in November of 1892, a young woman named Kate Morgan checked in alone, using a false name, and was found dead 5 days later on an exterior staircase leading to the beach. The official ruling was suicide. But Kate Morgan's real identity wasn't confirmed for almost a century, and even now, the exact reason she came to the hotel and what happened during those 5 days remain incomplete. Staff assigned to what's now called Room 3327 have reported flickering lights, television sets turning on by themselves, and closet doors that will not stay shut no matter how many times they are closed. The hotel doesn't hide this history. It leans into it, offering ghost tours that walk guests past the very staircase where Kate Morgan was found. That's the strange thing about the Hotel del Coronado. It's not an abandoned ruin. It's a 5-star resort that still books $40,000 weddings, in the same hallways where staff say they feel someone watching from the top of a staircase that lead to nowhere anyone wants to go. If a 5-star hotel can hold on to a haunting in plain sight, a house built specifically to summon the dead should be even harder to shake. The Villa Montezuma, a Victorian mansion built in San Diego in 1887 for musician and spiritualist Jesse Shepard, was constructed with seances in mind. Shepard held regular gatherings inside the house, claiming to channel the voices and even the piano playing of dead composers for paying audiences. Stained glass windows throughout the house depict Shepard's supposed spiritual guides, including several unnamed figures no one has ever been able to identify from any historical record. Shepard left California after only 2 years. He never returned, but the house he built for communicating with the dead did not go quiet after he left. City employees who later used the building as office space reported doors opening on their own, unexplained cold air moving through rooms with no windows open, and, on more than one occasion, the distinct sound of piano music playing in an empty house with no piano inside it. At first, staff assumed it was old pipes, old wood, an old building settling the way old buildings do. Instead, it became one of the most consistently reported hauntings among city-owned historic properties in California, according to multiple local paranormal research groups who have logged repeat visits over several decades. Some houses earn their reputation slowly, over 100 years of small, repeated incidents. Others earn it all at once, from a single institution's failure. Preston Castle, built in 1894 in the small gold country town of Ione, was originally the Preston School of Industry, a reform school for boys as young as 8 years old. For nearly 70 years, the castle-like building held thousands of children sent there for offenses ranging from truancy to serious crime, under conditions that later investigations would describe as harsh, overcrowded, and in some periods, abusive. In 1950, a housekeeper named Anna Corbin was found murdered in the building's basement. The case was never solved. A former inmate was tried and acquitted. The reform school closed in 1960. The building sat empty for decades, vandalized and deteriorating, until a preservation group began restoring it in the 1990s. What they found, alongside crumbling plaster and broken windows, was a pattern of visitor reports that never seemed to fade with time. Voices of children in empty hallways. The sound of running footsteps on the stairs leading to the basement where Anna Corbin died. Cold spots that thermal cameras have measured at 10 to 15 degrees below the surrounding air. With no environmental explanation the Preservation Society has been able to identify. Paranormal investigation teams that have filmed inside Preston Castle, including several who document their visits professionally, describe it as one of the few locations in the state where multiple independent teams report the exact same phenomena in the exact same rooms, without having compared notes beforehand. Not every haunted house in California is a mansion or an institution. Some are far smaller and far stranger, because of what was hidden inside the walls rather than what happened on the surface. The Brookdale Lodge, tucked into the redwoods of the Santa Cruz Mountains, was once a glamorous resort where a live brook ran directly through the dining room, and where Hollywood stars and even U.S. presidents were rumored to have visited during its 1940s heyday. The building's most persistent story involves a young girl, sometimes named Sarah in local accounts, said to have drowned in the mermaid pool near the lodge's brook room. Staff over the decades have reported a child's laughter echoing through empty hallways, wet footprints appearing on dry floors near the old pool area, and cold, damp air moving through rooms with the windows sealed shut. The lodge changed hands and purposes many times over the following decades, cycling through periods as a resort, a restaurant, and at points, near total abandonment. Each new set of owners reported inheriting the same stories from the ones before them, despite having no contact with each other and, in several cases, no prior knowledge of the lodge's history before purchasing it. That pattern, a story surviving multiple ownership changes with no continuity of staff or knowledge to carry it forward, is what separates a persistent haunting from a persistent rumor, according to several California-based historical societies that track the province of these claims. Not every house on this list needed a tragic death to earn its reputation. Some earned it through the sheer weight of history compressed into one address. The Pico House, built in 1870 in downtown Los Angeles by the state's last Mexican governor, Pio Pico, was once the most luxurious hotel in Southern California. It hosted the city's elite for 2 decades before falling into decline as the neighborhood around it changed. By the early 1900s, the building had cycled through uses as a flop house, a warehouse, and, during Los Angeles' Skid Row years, a place associated with poverty, violence, and unrecorded death that were never fully documented by the city. Preservationists who later restored the building for public tours reported unexplained temperature drops in the old hotel's back stairwells, the sound of footsteps on upper floors during hours when the building was confirmed empty and locked, and a recurring sense, reported independently by multiple tour guides, of being followed through the ground floor corridor. Because so many of the deaths associated with the building during its decline were never formally recorded, no one can say with certainty how many people the Pico House's later history actually touched. That uncertainty, historians note, is itself part of what makes the location unsettling.
That's it for today. See you in next video. Till then, subscribe to our channel. Thank you.